And before we start, if we can, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Lescu to welcome you to the college. And I'm glad he's able to share his time with the team here this afternoon. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Lescu.
Great, thank you. So excited really to bring the world right to our campus here and bring our campus to the rest of the world. COVID has really given us a run for our money this year, but what an opportunity that we can have, that we get to speak with you and learn from you and your team. First, let me just applaud all of the participants. In a time where conversation and debate is seemingly a smaller and smaller space around the world, in particular here in the United States, I just applaud you for taking the time to put the skills together. I'm sure you guys will make wonderful contributions no matter where you wind up. To me, debate is always about what university education is essentially offers, that it's about reasonable people having reasonable differences. So again, on behalf of the university administration, welcome to the mountains of Kentucky. Rwanda is a beautiful country. Looking forward to hearing your arguments today. And again, welcome.
In our debate this afternoon, we'll be having two of our debate team members participating, Anuj Dutta, who's a senior, and Gabriel Graham, who's junior, I believe now, right? Okay. And they've been with the debate team for 2 years. And so we're glad to debate the topic. We think it'd be a good one and educational for everybody involved. And, we obviously also believe in the power of the spoken word and shared with others to achieve greater understanding. So with that, we'll turn it back over to Rwanda, and we're looking forward to the debate, and we'll let you go ahead and say any introductory remarks you need to, or go ahead and get us started into the debate as you see fit. And thanks again for having us, and thanks for allowing us to be a part of this debate also.
Thank you so much. So today, debating for Rwanda, we have Merle and Stacy. They're juniors in high school, and they've been really working on this. So the debate is bound to be really great tonight. And I think we can go ahead and start. So if we could have the first speaker from proposition, please.
Hello, my name is Stacy, and I will be affirming to the motion that this House believes that social media companies should fact check posts made by world leaders. First of all, for our key terms, we have fact checking, social media, world leaders. And for world leaders, found that those are politicians in and out of power. For our definition for social media, we have private companies like Twitter and Facebook, where world leaders are allowed to share information. We are limiting this debate to Twitter and Facebook. And for fact checking, it is a way to verify if a post is factual and truthful, and if not, then the post is then removed. First of all, why is it necessary to fact check? Why is it an important thing, and why should world leaders undertake this? Automatically, world leaders have been such an important thing to this world, and have so much influence and supporters, people who look up to them and so forth. So if they use their platforms wrongly, if they use Twitter and Facebook wrongly, then it could cause a lot of unnecessary harm, unnecessary violence, and so forth and this allows private companies to step in. By law, private corporations have the rights to make decisions according to their policies and regulations, as it is not government intervention. But instead, it is made legal to ban posts to stop world leaders from spreading misinterpreted posts and so forth. It is their right as private companies. As an example of these bans, we got the incidents that happened a few months ago, in which Donald Trump lost the elections, and he started posting some misinformation about elections and the votes were rigged. Twitter later on started sending out fact-checking labels, warning him slowly by slowly that if he continued to give this false information, if he continued to lie, forth, and promote violence, then he would be then his account would be disabled. As he continued over and over, later on being one of the causes of the riots at the storming of the United States Capitol, he was banned. And as an example, he had over almost 90 million followers on Twitter, which shows how much people actually valued his opinion. People actually valued the things that he said, thus making us understand how important it is to fact check. For the plans that we have, for plans that are carried out on fact checking, social media companies won't focus on intervening on political messages of world leaders or what is true or false in political disputes, but instead will fact check whether the information is given is false or if it is true. This means that the anger or the violence, the brutality that is ignited in people when they hear false information, it will be prevented and stopped on a larger scale. We're not silencing the people. It's not a way that social media silences worldly, but instead it's a way that it stops and prevents people from listening to things that world leaders say that are not necessarily true and that cause a lot of fact-checking also doesn't the reach, but instead prevents major acts of violence and outbreaks. This means that information that causes unnecessary riots, unnecessary violence, unnecessary savagery, and roughness will be prevented and will be stopped, and that it still allows political dialogues to go on while stop unnecessary information that could harm or stop or do wrong to the people. As I go forth, if the negative says that fact-checking may be biased, then we argue that checkers have actually been licensed and certified by International Fact-Checking Network. And my second speaker is going to elaborate on the reliability of fact-checking and thus the status quo. Thank you.
All right, one moment for me to get all my ducks in a row as the leader of opposition. I have 8 minutes on the clock for this speech. Just before I begin, are my viewers, can you hear me fine? Are we coming through clear? All right, so 8 minutes starting now. First and foremost, I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to debate. Thank you to the debaters and the team from Rwanda. You've set up an excellent case today, and I look forward to clashing with you. So first, I'm going to go over the negations off case. I'm going to have 3 main contentions for you today, and I'm going to go through and cross-apply those to my opponents on case. So now, first and foremost, we're going to talk about the resolution just a little bit. My opponent's definitions are all clear, and I agree to debate under these terms. However, what was not clear is the criterion that we're going to be using to win the round. I'm not sure if I just didn't catch it due to some lag. My opponent is welcome to argue a separate one, but I'm going to be operating under the criteria of preponderance of evidence. Whoever brings the highest quantity of the highest quality evidence should be determined to be the winner of the round today. That said, moving into my first contention, and that is bad actors. Now, according to the resolution, my opponent has to say that social media companies themselves should be the ones that fact check these posts. Therefore, third-party organizations and people outside of these companies of Facebook and Twitter belong to the negative and are our grounds to argue. So my first off-case contention of bad actors, A point. So social media companies are both ill-equipped and frankly do not want the authority of fact-checking world leaders. My first point of evidence, Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, many more popular social medias, in an interview with CNBC in May 29th of 2020 said, "I don't think Facebook or internet platforms in general should be the arbiters of truth. Political speech is one of the most sensitive parts of a democracy, and people should be able to see what politicians say." Now, my opponent is arguing that they will not be censoring political speech. However, when we get into this fact-checking, we'll see that a lot of the things that we are fact-checking are political and are biased, such as information with COVID in attempts to get other bills passed, such as Donald Trump's attempt to remain in power through the Capitol insurrection. My second point of evidence is from Social Media Today. Social Media Today states that charging social media to monitor political truths and falsehoods is too difficult of a task due to the amount of gray areas that exist in both politics, health, and other areas. Social media giants such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram could be put in the very difficult position of playing political and moral referee. Mark Zuckerberg additionally went on in that same NBC interview that the algorithms currently on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp cannot detect the difference between truths and falsities. And finally, my last point of evidence for this contention is from the Associated Press and the Center for Public Opinion Research. On November 26 of 2019, it shows that 70% of Americans do not trust the information that they find on social media. And social media is the single least trusted place to find information about the government. So what is the impact of this judge? The first impact is that according to Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook himself, and Social Media Today, these demonstrate that social media companies themselves believe that they should not have the task of checking. They do not have the capability to fact check and to determine what is true and false and what is right and wrong. So my opponent is putting someone in charge of this great and difficult task, but the person in charge doesn't trust themselves to do the task well. The second impact is that public trust in social media companies is already low, and there's no proof provided by the affirmative that this will raise public trust in social media companies. And if anything, the negation is going to prove to you through our second contention that if anything, this will obliterate public trust in social media companies. So my second contention for you today is negative reaction. When social media companies fact check world leaders, the public often reacts in the opposite direction of the desired outcome, or it has no effect at all. My first point of evidence, B1, Harvard Kennedy School in November 2nd, 2020 said that fact check efforts of politicians may never work. There is little evidence that fact checks change support, beliefs, or actions for political parties, candidates, or agenda. Emily Thorson, the Department of Political Science in Boston College in 2016, ran 2 experiments that says exposure to negative political info continues to shape beliefs and actions even after that information is effectively discredited. So the impact of this judge, C1, is that people may outwardly acknowledge that this information is not true, but inwardly, they will still support whatever it was they were still supporting before. So the impact is that there is no impact in the affirmatives world. The affirmative is saying that we should fact check these posts and this will lead to lasting change. However, these fact checks don't do anything in the real world. All it does is say, okay, that might not be true. I'm still going to go and storm the Capitol. Moving forward, my third piece of evidence under negative reactions is from the Wall Street Journal. This study showed that when presented with fact-check information that does not fall in line with their pre-existing beliefs, audiences tend to double down on those beliefs and become angrier and less trusting of the source. Harvard Kennedy School went on to say that people assume that these fact-checks done by social media companies are partisan attacks. So the impact of this judge is that people assume that these are partisan attacks, and it leads to higher anger and less trust in social media. There is an additional source from MIT in August 2019, which talks about the implied truth effect, which my partner will expand on in his speech. This leads me to my third contention, better alternatives. It's that better alternatives already exist in the status quo. So my opponent already talked about how banning posts is a social media's right. This is true. It is a social media's right to ban posts. However, this is not fact-checking a post and falls outside of my opponent's spectrum. However, according to YouGov, in January 11th of 2021, 3 out of 5 Americans believe social media companies should be allowed to suspend politicians from company. Additionally, the MIT in their technology review in January of 2021 edition said that following the Myanmar genocide, Facebook banned the country's top military and political leaders from the platform. There's additional information on this that my partner will expand on in his next study. But the impact of this is that banning speech that incites violence is already against Facebook's policy and is thus the negations ground today. So the banning of posts by politicians is a better alternative to fact checking. And I now move on to the next speech. Thank you. So I'll have to talk about I am so sorry, I cannot hear. Is anyone else having this problem or is it just me? I'll reconnect.
I can't hear.
Can't hear?
Correct, cannot hear anyone.
She's not
Okay.
muted. I think she's having issues with her audio.
Okay.
Mel, if you can hear us, can you try and speak?
It looks like it may be connection issues.
Mel, can you hear us? We can't hear you. Can you drop off the call and connect again?
For that. So I'm going to start my minute again. Okay. So I'm affirming the motion that says that social media should fact check posts by world leaders. So I'm going to start with refutation of the negative side. So the first speaker came and talked about reduction of trust in social media. I want to first talk about our aims, which my first speaker touched on. The aims of, can you hear me?
No, I wanted to know, we're talking about dinner on Wednesday. Sarah said that she'd be free to get together. Ari said that she could have Elijah Wednesday. So, yeah, I know, that's awesome. So anyway, she has a call at 7:30, so she needs to be done at 7. But what I'm wondering about is and she said it'd be fine to include Irene and Tom. And she said Italian would be good. So I thought we'd order stuff from Mellows and bring it here. Or do you want for us to see about reserving those tables they have out front? Or what do you? Well, Ty, Sarah, Elijah, that's 3, and us, that's 5, and Irene and Tom, that's 7.
Okay, I'm going to try to continue. Sorry. So with the refutation, I was talking about how the first speaker came and touched on the
Well, if we could reserve those tables out in front of Mellows, I think that would be fine.
So, sorry, just a note that if people are listening in on the debate, if they'll mute themselves so that it won't be listened in on the general conversation. Thanks so much.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah. So, and we don't have to include Irene and Tom, and they may not be able to. What I thought I'd do is just ask Irene and Tom.
If anybody's listening in on the debate, if they could mute themselves, that way comments won't be heard by the rest of the group listening in on the debate. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to start again. I am affirming the motion that says that social media should, in fact, fact check posts by world leaders. So I'm going to start by refuting the points that the first speaker negative brought up. So they first talked about how there is reduction of trust in social media. We want to point out that our aims as the affirmative side is to reduce the promoting of violence, as well as the promoting of false information by world leaders that have a large following. Our aim is not to increase trust of people in social media companies such as Twitter and Twitter, as well as Instagram and companies like those, but instead to reduce the promoting of false information. So the first speaker also touched on the point that says that people should be able to see what politicians say. My first speaker touched on and then reinforced again that we are not refusing politicians to share political messages or have political discourse on social media. We only intervene when there has been a problem of igniting violence and then causing immediate harm in any way. If there's going to be sharing of false information, such as this vaccination is proven to be, this new vaccination of COVID is proven to be really a good one, and that's why you guys should use it, and yet it's false information that's going to cause harm to people, then that is where the social media companies view it as necessary to come and fact check, as well as possibly try to reduce that spreading of false information or igniting of violence. The first speaker also touched on how algorithms can't detect the difference between what's right and wrong. I'm going to refute that later on with my main argument of the reliability of fact checking. They talked about how social media is the least trusted place of information, but how is it that it's the least trusted place and yet people, a person like Donald Trump is able to promote a riot of the parliament in the United States? How is it that he's able to ignite hate and violence in a group of people and promote them towards behaving a certain type of way? The truth is that we look up to these leaders, these world leaders, and that's why once they say something, it's proven to be reliable as well as correct, and so people carry on the actions that they're being promoted to carry on. I can give an example of the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, where world leaders reinforced and ignited violence in the people, and therefore the people did as the world leaders said. The truth is that we look up to them. For example, Donald Trump, that has about 90 million followers on Twitter, that look up to him and are possibly going to do as he says, or his ideas are considered more correct or reliable. And then the social media companies have no right or capabilities to fact check. I'm going to refute that as well with my reliability of fact checking. And they also talked about how fact checking doesn't have an impact. But I want to ask you on the other side, how what are the limits to what world leaders can say? What are the limits to what they can ignite? What are the limits to what they can promote? How are you going to sit back and then wait for them to promote violence and hate and then say that in the meantime, fact checking is not going to change much? I'm going to jump right into the point of how it's done and the status quo with, for example, Facebook. The social media companies will work with independent fact checkers to limit the false information that is going viral. So this means that this independent fact checkers, which is something that's going on with Facebook as well as Twitter, these are people that have been licensed as well as certified by the International Fact-Checking Network, meaning it's not just robots or machines or the internet that can't contextualize a message or don't know the difference between right and wrong. These are people that have been certified and given licenses to look at what has reached the edge of being dangerous and promotes hate and false information that causes harm. So then the program doesn't debate on if something is true or false. That is not what we look towards. We're not looking towards discourse between two political parties or two world leaders that are having disagreements, and then we fact check. We're only looking at it from a perspective of promoting violence or promoting hate that's going to cause harm to a certain group of people. And if the message specifically is going viral, that's when the need of fact checking comes in. You talked about how, I always said, we're talking about how the fact checking labels are already put into place before this. This means that before the company comes and intervenes and the Department of Fact Checking checks if they see that these messages promote something certain, they give out warnings referred to as fact checking labels. And once it's reached a certain point where there is more danger being caused or it's more harm in the way, then that is where there can be taken certain measures of temporarily disabling the account or the post by the world leaders. And there are lines and clear policies on what isn't permitted in false information, such as voter suppression and giving out false information that causes harm, that has an effect, regardless of who says it. But world leaders have a large following and they have a large impact. And what they say usually is considered to be the right thing. So if my president comes and says something, I'm going to say, hey, since he's the president, what he's saying must be the right or correct. And so that's why fact checking is necessary to prove that the information being given out to the people that's causing harm is the right information or it's not the right information. And then when it does with health, these companies with scientists and fact checkers, and therefore they're certified, meaning that they are reliable. And these things have already been done in the status quo with Twitter recently with the Donald Trump situation and the rioting that took place at the parliament in the US. And so all of this in the end reduces violence, that promoting violence as well as hate or false information being spread around and going viral around the internet, simultaneously promoting freedom of speech, because we're not limiting what they say, but we only stop it when it's promoting violence or it's coming to extreme ends. And we're bringing back the point of how by law they're allowed to do this. So since we're not silencing the companies, we're not silencing the world leaders, we're not silencing the people trying to give out the message. So there is less bias involved. It's not that a company doesn't support a certain cause of a world leader, so then they fact check and then they have a certain reason to temporarily disable them. It's through processes and procedures that come with the company's certain policies, and then if they go against these policies, then that is a reason for them to be banned off the app, as well as simultaneously stopping the promotion of violence and any other acts that may cause immediate harm to the people. So I think that's it. And yeah, thank you.
So whenever my judges are ready, and perfect. I'm gonna start the 8-minute timer now. So really, thank you to my judges and my audience for being here today. And with that said, let's move to the resolution real quick. So the resolution for today's round is saying that this House believes that social media companies should fact checks post gonna use is preponderance of evidence, or whoever brings the more evidence to the table, showing why social media companies should fact check or should not fact. And with this said, judges and audience, I'm going to move to my opponent's last speech, and I'm going to give you some rebuttals. Then I'm going to focus on the points which my opponent dropped. And if we have any time left, I'm going to give you. He was talking about that how these companies, third-party companies intervene with fact checking with Facebook and Twitter. But again, the resolution today says that social media companies should fact check posts by world leaders and judges. If these companies are using any third-party companies which are outside the sources, that should be a ground for the negative today. And in the next point, she was talking about that how what president says must be right, and people believe that whatever president says right. But again, in my third contention, the negative reactions, my opponent was talking about that how shows that how where is that? Second. In the second contention, my opponent was talking about that how studies found that people who visit, that 3 out of 5 Americans believe that social media companies should be allowed to suspend politicians from posting, and people already don't trust these companies. And again, there are 210 active fact-checking organizations in 68 countries, which all these people can go and get their fact checkings from. And again, the next point, my opponent was talking about that, that is it to stop the violence and on the social media company. But again, the companies are just following the policies in it. And again, my opponent asked me to cover up some points here. In the third contention, better alternatives, from the MIT Tech Review, and again from the Facebook policy page too. Facebook just wants people to follow the policies. People can express themselves and however they want. The only rule is not to getting involved with voter suppression and violence towards anyone. And again, judges, my opponent is talking about to stop violence and the roughness on these things. And if the social media companies bans anyone from their social media platform, for example, Donald Trump, they are just following the policies, which they already have. They're not doing any fact checks. And then they're talking about, then before that, she was talking about that how social media companies have no right and no reliable. But again, my opponent said that, my teammate said that they don't even have the means. Moving to my first contingent, the bad actors, all the evidence, the B points show that how Mark Zuckerberg himself, the owner of Facebook, says that they don't have the means to do it. And in B3, we were talking about how these Facebook and all other social media companies cannot detect the difference between what is true and wrong because they don't have the technology to do it. The algorithms, all the software which they use to fact checks, they cannot decide things which are true or false. They are just covering up the basic. Policies which these companies have. And again, moving to the points which my opponent dropped. Again, my opponent didn't talk about the evidences from the first contingent about that how from the social media today, that charging social media to monitor political truth and falsehood is a difficult task, because the one problem with fact checking is that there are often gray areas, especially in politics, and all these companies cannot do the fact checks because they don't have the means to do it at the first place. Then my opponent didn't talk about the algorithms. My opponent didn't talk about that how 11% of the Americans, only 11% of the American trust social medias, and 70% of the Americans said they have little or no trust on whatever they find on social media companies. And again, judges, the biggest impact over here is that the owner of the companies, the owner of the Facebook, is literally saying himself that they don't have the means and they shouldn't be the arbiter of the truth at the first place. And then my opponent, on the second contingency, also missed a lot of information. For example, the Brookings Institute, how 68 countries have 210 active fact-checking organizations, which are better than the fact checks from these companies. And also my opponent wanted me to cover the B4 point, which was from the MIT Tech Review in January. Leaders from the platform. Also banned Hezbollah. It's a terror group, but it's also a legitimate political party in Lebanon. So again, these companies were not doing fact checks over here. They were just following their basic global policies, which is again, not to get involved with voter suppression and promote violence towards anyone. And again, moving to my second contingent B4 point, how from the MIT in August 2019, that how misinformation is shared, assume that all the information and sources have been fact checked. So everything we see on the social medias and which information is being taken down, the information is more likely to be shared as misinformation because audiences assume that all the information they see is fact-checked and verified. But in that case, it's not the truth because these companies at the first place don't even have the means to do it. And again, judges, if my opponent is talking about third parties and how these companies are taking help from the third parties, fact-checking companies, that is a case for the negative because it's our burden to prove that why social media companies should not fact check posts by world readers, but instead of doing that, they should go with the better alternatives, which are using these 210 active fact check company organizations active at the
Okay, 4 minutes on the clock for the negations last speech. Right. Now we have 4 minutes on the clock for the opposition's last speech, beginning now. So first and foremost, I would like to offer one quick round of thank yous to the government side today. They've done a fantastic job debating this case today, and it's been very fun and educational for both sides. So I don't have a lot of time, just under 4 minutes. So I'm going to get straight into some voting issues, some reasons you can feel confident, maybe even a little bit good about yourself casting a negative ballot today, or I apologize, an opposition ballot. IPDA habits die hard. So my first voter for you today is the weighing mechanism, preponderance of evidence. This was never refuted by the government side, so they agreed to the preponderance of evidence criteria. And a lot of their, this moves me into my second voter, which is evidence. A lot of their arguments were ideological and in the clouds, without a lot of hard source citation or statistical data to prove these points. However, judges, I can show you interviews from Mark Zuckerberg, polls from the Associated Press, social media today, 2 different MIT studies, Emily Thorson, Harvard Kennedy School, the Wall Street Journal, Dartmouth College, YouGov, all of these are different sources which have been cited multiple times throughout the speech and show us that this resolution is not true. And again, most of the refutation to this has been ideological without a lot of specific evidence to prove the government's case today. And this leads me into my third voter, which of course is no trust. So in my first speech, I stated that there was no proof by the affirmative that fact-checking from social media companies will raise public trust. If anything, it will obliterate it. This has flown through the entire round, with my opponent even conceding that they are not trying to add credibility to social media companies. However, as both me and my partner have stated throughout this argument, and has not been refuted by the government side, the government is limited to social media companies in this resolution. Any outsider interference or outsourcing is the negations, or I'm sorry, the opposition's ground today. So that said, if my opponent is limited to social media companies, as they have not refuted and in their last speech are not allowed to, and if the public has no trust in these social media companies, then how are social media companies supposed to have any credibility at all as legitimate fact-checking organizations? So moving on to my fourth voter today. Again, I briefly mentioned that it was never thoroughly refuted by our opponents, that they were limited to using social media companies to fact check. And as such, our third contention of better alternatives flows through the round today, talking about the banning and suspension of politicians. This is not fact-checking. This is something different entirely that goes with their pre-existing policies. This flows through the round today. And additionally, the use of third-party fact-checking organizations are still going. I'm sorry. Apparently my 4 minutes are over. So thank you. Goodbye.
Can we get the reply speech from position?
Sorry, hi. So as we had stated, the motion and with what I had said in my first speech, our points, some of our points was that through fact checking, there is freedom of speech, and how there is a certain plan and a way for fact checking to continue, in which social media is not intervening with the people with political messages from world leaders, but instead is actually just making sure that there's less violence and less immediate harm on a larger scale. As what my second speaker had said, she talks about how it is not about the reduction of trust, like it's not about the trust, but instead about reducing the harm that is caused by world leaders and so forth. They have you cannot follow policies without fact checking, because fact checking in itself goes against harmful ways in which there are no actual policies against that, in harming the. She showed more my second speaker showed more reliability in fact checking, and they have not properly addressed that. It's more efficient than just following their policies, as I said and as she mentioned, because policies don't necessarily give an outline or show that if world leaders promote this and this, then this and this will happen. Because given our examples, fact-checking did riots and less harm in the US and so forth. As I had talked about earlier, as they talked about and said,
Stacy is frozen. Stacy, you still have 1 minute if you still had something to say.
Sorry, my internet glitched for a second. But yes, lastly, as I had said earlier, this debate was not based on the trust of the people and their trust in social media, but instead specifically about how fact-checking actually reduces the harm caused in real life by world leaders who believe a certain way and use their power negatively. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for such a wonderful debate. I'm gonna pass this to Jean-Michel to give some feedback, and then maybe Jay Byrne from Cumberland is gonna give some closing remarks. Does that work? Yes.
Yes. Hey, hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to both teams for a very interesting debate. I know we're not together, but maybe we can snap fingers. I don't know, something to just show what an amazing debate this was. First of all, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the team here in Rwanda. I think it should be 2 p.m. on your side, and then it's 8 p.m. here. And I say if there is anything that this period has given us is the ability to connect with people from all over the world. And we're so excited because this is the first time that we are hosted, even if it's virtually, by a team from Kentucky. So hey, that's goes well. I think we'll definitely love to meet in person and have this debate in person. So I'm just going to give some feedback. I think going to raise a lot of questions that to the general public. I'd like to say that there's a few things that I had hoped that I would have gotten to. I think that, first of all, I think that the affirmative missed a chance to answer a few key questions that the negative team brought that I think could have made the debate a little bit more interesting. I think, first of all, the idea, which, when we read the motion, I think that the negative does propose that the affirmative has to defend social media companies as the actors. And I think this argument about bad actors is an argument that I think the affirmative could have done a better job at really, diving into, because I think it does present quite an opportunity, right? It's if Mark Zuckerberg is given all this power and he himself says that they're not well equipped to be able to handle this problem, then I think that that is a clash that needed to really happen and have a bigger role in this debate. I also think that the other arguments that I think was also interesting that we never really went through is, I think the idea, the negative reaction. So what is going to happen? I think that part of what I think on both sides could have been good is to take a little bit the context outside of the US and then see in other places around the world what could have been the impact for that, right? So in the US, of course, there's going to be a partisan attack. There's going to be, all these harms that you talk about. But is there an opportunity in other places that are not the US where a policy like this could have worked really well? And what I'd hope the affirmative could also make the argument is that I think also looking at it on the negative side, I think the weighing mechanism, I don't think it was strong enough. I think we could have gotten, I don't know, it was, I thought we could have gotten another, it's quite simple to have, the weighing mechanism the one who brings the best evidence and all of that. But I always say if we're thinking about this debate as almost, as a public debate, and I think that there are different ways that we could look for another weighing mechanism that will have a real world, not like a very technical debate sort of mechanism. I thought, I think I'd have thought, something along the lines of, which side is better for democracy, or because those are the big questions that most people ask themselves. Which side is better for democracy, or which side is, I know that violence became one of the things that we talked about, or which side reduce population. And I think that would have been, one better way that we could have gone about it. I think that one example that I'd hoped that, could have been interesting is, now social media brought in, challenges in its own ways, but then, is there an opportunity? So I think the affirmative could have done a better job of showing, for example, in many societies that might be closed off, that might be authoritarian, that maybe social media could play a role that it does not play, for example, in the US. So I thought it was a very interesting debate. The good thing about a good debate is it always feels like there's another debate that needs to happen. So I'm definitely excited for that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone who showed up tonight. And on behalf of iDebate, we're very excited. This is a debate that we're going to show to more people, and is probably going to have a lot more conversation going on. So yeah, I'll leave it up to Jay and give the concluding remarks.
We just say we're so thankful for you allowing us to be a part of this debate. Also, we definitely learned a lot from delving into it too. This is a hard topic in some ways because I don't know necessarily about in the world, but definitely in large parts, trust seems to be at an all-time low, and sometimes in some institutions. So people have reservations about social media organizations, and they also have some reservations about politicians. And it's not, America isn't alone in having some polarization. So there are definitely lots of public groups that don't see the same on a lot of topics. So when they're so opposed, it is hard to figure out then how to come to some solutions. Like, how do you provide facts in a world where a large percentage might not agree with facts? So it's definitely a tough topic that sometimes time to talk about, because the trust in and of itself in some of our institutions seems to be at a low point right now. But I think dialogue is a way to start that conversation and to hopefully get to where we can get solutions that everybody can agree upon as a baseline. And I also agree with the argument looking at the impact levels. We kind of delved into our research and some studies that looked at the impact individual level that might happen if something is looked at as a message, but there's also like a societal impact that happens too, right? Over time, or a large group of people. And so looking at the long-term or the large-scale impacts, probably on either side could have been an added factor to the debate. We always hit limitations that maybe make it harder for we would like to get also. But I would just say we learned a lot. Like a lot of things, unfortunately, there's a lot of problems we see in the world. The solutions aren't always as easy as we'd like them. But the challenge is to take the steps we can to make a better world as much as we can too. We are so thankful to have this and to have you us to meet and interact with your students too, and for all the people who participated and were involved too. I'll get one last time to the iDebate Rwanda to close out if needed, but just say thanks for having us be a part of this. We learned a lot, and we really appreciate engagement with your team and the exchange of ideas that we were able to have.
Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll have another debate and this debate is going to be on YouTube, and we'll continue sharing that. The debates in the fall. And yeah, so wish you all a great day for you guys. It'll be a good day. And then thank you all for coming tonight. And yeah, it was great having you all here.
Thank you so much.